The unexpected encounter, the rain drummed against the windows of Midnight Grounds as Marcus Reed pushed through the heavy glass door, shaking droplets from his expensive wool coat. At 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the upscale cafe was nearly empty, except for a few late-night workers hunched over laptops and the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Marcus needed the caffeine. Another 16-hour day building his tech empire had left him wired but exhausted, a familiar contradiction that had defined his life for the past 2 years. He approached the counter, already reaching for his platinum card when he froze mid-step. Behind the espresso machine, focused intently on steaming milk, stood a woman he recognized instantly, despite the simple black uniform and hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The profile was unmistakable, the gentle curve of her neck, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating, the graceful movements he had once watched make coffee in their shared kitchen every morning. Emma. His ex-wife turned at the sound of approaching footsteps, and their eyes met across the marble counter. The recognition hit them both simultaneously. Emma's face went pale, the metal milk pitcher slipping from her fingers and clattering loudly against the counter. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs as if he'd been punched. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hiss of the espresso machine. But it wasn't just Emma standing there. It was Emma, with a rounded belly that strained against the black apron, unmistakably pregnant. Marcus's eyes dropped involuntarily to her midsection, then snapped back up to her face, which had flushed red with what looked like embarrassment and something else, panic. "What can I get you?" she asked, attempting to regain her professional composure, but her hands trembled as she straightened the counter. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. His mind, usually sharp enough to navigate complex business negotiations worth millions, had simply shut down. Emma Torres, who had once been Emma Reed, was standing before him in a coffee shop uniform at midnight, pregnant and working the late shift. The woman who had once organized charity galas and managed their household staff was now making lattes for insomniacs and night shift workers. "Coffee," he finally managed, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. "Just black coffee." Emma nodded and turned to the machine, her movements now stiff and careful. Marcus watched her profile, noting the subtle changes 2 years had brought. She was thinner everywhere except her belly, her face more angular with faint lines around her, eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage. Her wedding ring was gone, of course, but there was also no other ring in its place. "Large?" she asked without looking at him. "Yes." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the grinding of coffee beans and the ambient noise of the cafe. Marcus found himself studying every detail. The way she favored her right leg slightly, the dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. The way she moved with the careful deliberateness of someone whose body was no longer entirely her own. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed for just an instant. Emma pulled back as if burned, but not before Marcus felt the slight calluses that hadn't been there before. Working hands now, not the soft hands of someone who'd never known real labor. "That'll be $4.50, she said, still not quite meeting. His eyes. Marcus handed her a 20 without thinking. "Keep the change." Emma's jaw tightened. "I don't need charity, Marcus." The words hung between them like a physical barrier. Marcus recognized the pride in her voice, the same stubborn independence that had both attracted and frustrated him during their marriage. But now it seemed different, harder-edged, born of necessity rather than choice. "I didn't mean, your change is $15.50. Emma's voice was crisp, professional. She counted out the bills and coins with precise, angry movements. Marcus took the money, knowing that pressing the issue would only make things worse. But questions burned in his throat. What had happened? How had she ended up here? Who was the father? Where was he? "Emma," he started, but she had already turned away to clean the espresso machine with unnecessary vigor. The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered, and Emma's relief was palpable as she called out a cheerful greeting. Marcus stood there for another moment, coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the woman he had once promised to love forever pretend he didn't exist. Finally, he walked to a corner table where he could see the counter but remain relatively unobserved. He pulled out his phone and pretended to scroll through emails, but his attention remained fixed on Emma. Every interaction she had with customers was polite but distant, professional but not warm. This wasn't the Emma he remembered, the woman who lit up rooms with her genuine interest in everyone around her. As the clock neared midnight, Marcus realized he was witnessing something that would change everything he thought he knew about the past 2 years. Emma wasn't thriving without him, as he told himself. She wasn't living her best life, as her lawyer had insisted during the divorce proceedings. She was surviving, barely, and she was doing it alone. Part 2. Fragments of the past. Emma's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she mechanically wiped down the espresso machine for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Marcus had been sitting at that corner table for over an hour now, nursing the same cup of black coffee and pretending to work on his laptop. She could feel his eyes on her every movement, and it was making her skin crawl with a mixture of panic and something else she didn't want to acknowledge. At 1:15 a.m., her replacement arrived, a college student named Jake, who worked the graveyard shift to pay for his engineering degree. Emma had never been more grateful to see anyone in her life. "You look like hell," Jake observed as he tied on his apron. "Everything okay?" Emma forced a smile. "Just tired, long day." She gathered her things quickly, hoping Marcus had lost interest and left. But as she pushed through the employee exit into the alley behind the cafe, she heard footsteps on wet pavement. Behind her, "Emma, wait!" She stopped but didn't turn around. The rain had softened to a fine mist that clung to everything like a shroud. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want to understand what happened to you. What happened to me?" Emma finally turned, and the streetlight revealed tears she'd been holding back for hours. "You happened to me, you and your lawyers and your prenup. That left me with practically nothing." Marcus stepped closer, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles without him seeming to notice. "The settlement was fair, 50,000 and 50,000. Emma's laugh was bitter. "Do you know how long 50,000 lasts when you haven't worked in 5 years? When your only skills are planning charity events and hosting dinner parties? When every potential employer sees a gap in your resume and assumes you're not serious about work?" The words poured out of her like a dam breaking. She had kept them locked inside for so long that now they felt unstoppable. "I tried, Marcus. I tried so hard to rebuild. I went back to school for marketing, used most of the settlement money for tuition, thinking I could get back into my old field." She wrapped her arms around her belly protectively. But technology had changed. Everything was digital now. Social media marketing, analytics, things I'd never learned. The jobs I could get paid $12 an hour. $12 an hour for someone who used to manage million-dollar charity budgets. Marcus stood frozen, raindrops collecting on his dark hair, as Emma continued her devastating recounting. "I waited tables. I worked retail. I cleaned offices at night and served coffee during the day. And just when I thought maybe I could make it work, I met someone who made me believe I could have a life again." "The father?" Marcus said quietly. Emma nodded, fresh tears mixing with the mist on her cheeks. "Ryan Blackwood. He was charming, successful, everything you were but warmer. He said he loved me. He said he wanted a family. When I got pregnant, he was overjoyed." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "For exactly 3 weeks. What happened?" "His wife happened." Emma's voice turned flat, emotionless. "His wife of 10 years, and their 2 children happened. Turns out Ryan had a pattern of seducing struggling, single women. I wasn't special, I was just convenient. Marcus felt sick. Emma, I had no idea. No, you didn't. Because you made it very clear during our divorce that my problems were no longer your concern. You said, and I quote, "You wanted independence, Emma. This is what it looks like." She turned to go. Well, congratulations, you were right. Wait. Marcus caught her arm gently. Please just talk to me 5 minutes. Emma looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. In the dim streetlight, he looked older, more lined than she remembered. Success hadn't made him look satisfied. It had made him look hungry, restless. Why? She asked. Why now? You've had 2 years to track me down if you cared. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, rain dripping steadily around them. Because I've been lying to myself for 2 years, telling myself you were better off without me. Tonight, seeing you like this, I realized I've been the biggest fool alive. Emma studied his face, searching for the manipulation she expected to find there. But all she saw was raw honesty that looked like it was costing him something. The investigation Naomi Chen had worked as Marcus Reed's executive assistant for 4 years, and in that time she had seen him handle billion-dollar acquisitions, hostile takeovers, and crisis management with the cold precision of a surgeon. She had never seen him pace his penthouse office at 3 a.m., disheveled and wild-eyed, demanding impossible research tasks. I need everything, Marcus said for the 3rd time, running his hands through his hair. Everything about Emma Torres. Maiden. Name Torres. Married name Reed. Where she lives, where she works besides that cafe, her medical records if you can get them, her financial situation, and most importantly... He stopped pacing and faced Naomi. Everything about Ryan Blackwood. Naomi looked up from her laptop, where she'd been working since Marcus had called her at 2:30 a.m., demanding she come in immediately. Mr. Reed, some of what you're asking for is highly illegal. Medical records, financial information. I can't just hack into private databases. Then find another way. Marcus's voice had an edge she'd never heard before. Hire private investigators. Use contacts. I don't care what it costs. May I ask why this is so urgent? Yesterday you were focused entirely on the Portland acquisition, and now you're... Yesterday I was an idiot, Marcus interrupted. Today I'm trying to fix the biggest mistake of my life before it's too late. Naomi had her suspicions about who Emma Torres might be. She'd handled Marcus's divorce proceedings after all, but she kept her voice neutral. I'll need at least 24 hours for comprehensive information, 48 for the kind of detail you're requesting. You have 12 hours. Mr. Reed, Naomi. Marcus sat down heavily in his desk chair, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability in his expression. The woman I saw last night is pregnant and working the night. Shift at a coffee shop. She's thin, exhausted, and she flinched when I tried to help her. Whatever happened to her after our divorce, I need to know, and I need to know today. Naomi had worked for powerful men before Marcus, and she'd learned to read between the lines. This wasn't about business or even guilt. This was about a man, confronting the wreckage of a choice that had been haunting him for years. I'll make some calls, she said quietly. 6 hours later, Naomi returned with a folder that seemed too thin for the devastation it contained. It's worse than you probably imagined, she said without preamble, settling across from Marcus's desk. Emma Torres, Emma Reed, tried to rebuild her life exactly the way she told you. Marketing courses, entry-level positions, the whole thing. But she was competing against 25-year-olds with current skills and no employment gaps. Marcus opened the folder, scanning the employment records Naomi had compiled. A parade of minimum-wage jobs, each lasting only a few months. Why did she keep getting fired? She wasn't fired from most of them. She quit when better opportunities came along or when the hours conflicted with her classes. Classic mistake. of someone who doesn't understand that when you're starting over, you can't be choosy. Naomi pointed to a section of the report. Her biggest problem was the gap. 5 years out of the workforce is career death in marketing, especially for someone who was never technically skilled to begin with. And Ryan Blackwood, Naomi's expression darkened. That's where it gets ugly. Ryan Blackwood, 38, senior partner at Blackwood & Associates Architecture. Married to Jennifer Blackwood for 12 years, 2 children ages 8 and 10. Net worth approximately $4 million. He left his family for Emma? No, that's just it. He never intended to leave his family. I found evidence of at least 3 other relationships over the past 5 years, all with women in vulnerable situations. Divorced, financially struggling, emotionally isolated. Naomi pulled out printed emails from a private investigator's report. He has a type and a pattern. Marcus read through the emails, each one more damning than the last. Ryan describing his conquest strategies to a friend, laughing about women who were grateful enough not to ask questions. Emma's name appeared in several messages, along with crude assessments of her desperation level and how long he thought he could string her along. He planned this, Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. He targeted her specifically because she was vulnerable. It gets worse. When Emma told him about the pregnancy, he didn't just abandon her, he threatened her, told her if she tried to contact his family or demand support, he'd claim she'd been stalking him and get a restraining order. Marcus looked up sharply. He threatened a pregnant woman. Legal threats, but yes. Emma was terrified of ending up in court with no money for lawyers, so she backed down completely. Haven't spoken since. Naomi hesitated. There's something else. I managed to access some of her medical records through unofficial channels. And she's been going to a free clinic in the worst part of town. She's anemic, her blood pressure is elevated, and she's lost weight during pregnancy instead of gaining it. The medical notes mention food insecurity and housing instability. Naomi closed the folder. Marcus, she's not just struggling, she's in crisis. Marcus stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Somewhere down there, Emma was probably getting ready for another shift, choosing between groceries and prenatal vitamins, wondering how she'd manage when the baby came. What's her current financial situation? 2 months behind on rent. Her landlord is starting eviction proceedings. She owes about $3,000 in medical bills. Her car was repossessed last month, which is why she's taking public transportation to jobs that are far apart. Naomi's voice gentled. She's applied for state assistance, but there's a waiting list. She's basically one emergency away from homelessness. Marcus turned back to Naomi. I want you to set up a meeting with Ryan Blackwood. Sir? Tell him Marcus. Reed wants to discuss a potential architectural contract. Big project, lucrative enough that he'll clear his schedule. Naomi looked concerned. What are you planning? I'm planning to have a conversation with the man who destroyed my ex-wife's life. Marcus's smile was cold. A very enlightening conversation. Marcus, if you're thinking about revenge, I'm thinking about justice. There's a difference. Marcus sat back down, his business mind finally engaging with the clarity he was famous for. But first, I need you to do something else. Find out which hospital Emma is planning to use for delivery. Set up an account to cover all her medical expenses. Do it anonymously. She'll figure out it was you. Maybe, but by then, the bills will already be paid. Marcus pulled out his phone. And schedule that meeting with Blackwood for this afternoon. It's time someone held him accountable for what he's done. As Naomi left to make arrangements, Marcus remained at his desk, staring at Emma's file. He was beginning to understand that his own actions had set her up for Ryan's predation. By leaving her isolated and financially vulnerable, Marcus had created the perfect victim for a man like Ryan Blackwood. Some mistakes couldn't be undone. but some wrongs could still be made right. Part 4. Crossing the Line. The offices of Blackwood. An associates occupied the entire 15th floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass and chrome and carefully curated modern art. Marcus Reed walked through the reception area with the confident stride of a man worth $300 million, noting how the staff straightened when his identity was confirmed. Money opened doors, commanded respect, and today it would serve justice. Ryan Blackwood emerged from a corner office with the easy smile of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. He was handsome in an obvious way, the kind of looks that probably made women trust him too quickly. Tall, athletic build maintained by an expensive personal trainer, silver threading his temples in a way that suggested distinguished rather than aging. Mr. Reed, Ryan extended a manicured hand. This is quite an honor. I have to admit, I was surprised when your assistant called about a potential project. Marcus shook the offered hand, resisting the urge to crush the fingers that had once touched Emma with false tenderness. I like to keep my options open when it comes to new ventures. Ryan led him into a conference room with panoramic city views, clearly designed to impress potential clients. Coffee? Water? I have to say, your reputation precedes you. The Reed Group's expansion into hospitality has been remarkable. Let's skip the pleasantries, Marcus said, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than Emma made in a month. I'm here about Emma Torres. The change in Ryan was instantaneous. His practiced smile faltered. His posture shifted from confident to wary. I'm sorry. I don't understand. I thought you wanted to discuss architecture. I do. Specifically, I want to discuss how you architected the destruction of a pregnant woman's life. Ryan stood abruptly. I think there's been some misunderstanding. I don't know what Emma might have told you, but sit down. Marcus's voice carried the authority of someone who owned boardrooms and commanded empires. We're going to have a conversation, Ryan. The only question is whether it's civilized or whether I make some phone calls to certain mutual acquaintances about your extracurricular activities. Ryan sat, but his eyes had gone hard. Who exactly are you to Emma Torres? I'm her ex-husband, and I'm the man who's going to make sure you face consequences for what you've done. The choice Emma's studio apartment was on the 4th floor of a building where the elevator hadn't worked in 6 months and the hallway smelled of cooking grease and disappointment. Marcus climbed the stairs slowly, carrying groceries he'd bought. At the organic market across town, the kind of food Emma used to take for granted when they were married. His hands shook slightly as he knocked on the door marked 4B. The silence stretched long enough that he wondered if she wasn't home, but finally he heard the security chain sliding back, and the door opened just wide enough for Emma to peer through. The Gap. How did you get my address? She asked, not opening the door wider. I hired someone to find you. We need to talk. I'm working the morning shift tomorrow. I need to sleep. Emma, please, just 5 minutes. She studied his face through The Gap, and something in his expression must have convinced her, because she stepped back and opened the door fully. Marcus entered the small space, trying not to let his shock show on his face. The apartment was tiny, smaller than his walk-in closet, but scrupulously clean. A Murphy bed dominated one wall, currently folded up to make room for a small table, and 2 mismatched chairs. A kitchenette occupied one corner, and through an open doorway he could see a bathroom barely large enough for one person. There were no personal touches, no photographs, no artwork, just the basic furniture that had probably come with the rental. Cozy, he said, immediately regretting the comment when Emma's jaw tightened. It's what I can afford. She remained, standing by the door, not inviting him further in. What do you want, Marcus? He held up the grocery bags. I brought food, real food, protein, vegetables, prenatal vitamins. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's an apology. Marcus Set the bags on the small table. Emma, I found out about Ryan Blackwood, about what he did to you. Emma's face went white. You had no right to investigate my private life. I had every right to understand why my ex-wife is working herself to death while pregnant. Marcus pulled out one of the chairs. Sit down, please, you look exhausted. Emma remained standing, but Marcus could see the weariness in every line of her body. What do you know? I know he's married. I know he's done this before. I know he threatened you when you told him about the pregnancy. Marcus's voice gentled. I know you've been facing this alone when you shouldn't have to. Emma wrapped her arms around her belly protectively. And what exactly do you plan to do with this information? Ruin his life? Make yourself feel better about abandoning me first? The accusation hit its mark. You're right, I abandoned you. I was cruel and heartless, and I convinced myself it was for the best. Marcus took a step toward her. But Emma, what Ryan did to you was evil. He targeted you specifically because I left you vulnerable. So this is about your guilt? No. Marcus shook his head. This is about the fact that I love you. I've loved you for 2 years, even when I was trying to hate you. I've loved you through every successful business deal that felt empty, through every relationship that meant nothing, through every night I stood in my penthouse looking out at the city and wondering what you were doing. Emma stared at him. You don't get to say that to me now, not when I'm like this. When you're like what? Pregnant, struggling, human. Marcus moved closer. Emma, I don't care about any of it. I don't care that you're carrying another man's child. I don't care that you're not the woman I married. I care that you're the woman standing in front of me right now, and I want to spend whatever time you'll give me proving that I can be better than I was. Emma was quiet for a long moment, one hand unconsciously rubbing her belly, where the baby was moving restlessly. I went to see Ryan today, Marcus said quietly. Emma's head snapped up.